One day, as Jesus was walking, a Roman centurion sent a message to Jesus. He had a slave that he loved who was very sick and near death. He asked Jesus to come and heal his slave. The Jews told Jesus that he should go to the centurion and heal his slave. They told him how he loved the Jewish people. They told him how he had built them a synagogue. In other words, they told Jesus that this centurion deserved to have Jesus come and help him. Luke chapter 7, verses 6 and 7, we read these words. Jesus went with them. He was not far from the house when the officer sent friends to tell Jesus, "Sir, don't bother. I don't deserve to have you come into my house. That's why I didn't come to you. But just give a command and let my servant be cured." This centurion led 100 soldiers. He had great respect and authority. Yet he said he wasn't worthy. Why? He knew that he was not of the Jewish people. He knew that he was part of the Roman military that occupied the land. This leader did not use his military power to force Jesus to help him. Instead, he recognized that he was not even worthy to meet Jesus. He knew he had no worth in the eyes of Jesus. In other words, he humbled himself. What was the result? Luke chapter 7, verses 9 and 10, we read these words together. Jesus was amazed at the officer when he heard these words. He turned to the crowd following him and said, "I can guarantee that I haven't found faith as great as this in Israel." When the men who had been sent returned to the house, they found the servant healthy again. We are nearing the end of the church year. The church year is different from the regular year, the calendar year. Our church year starts with the season of Advent. It is the 4 weeks leading up to Christmas. This year, Advent starts on December 1st, or the first Sunday in December. It is the time of year when we look forward to the coming of the Christ child at Christmas. It's also the time that we look for the second coming of Jesus. We call this second coming the end, or the day of judgment. During these last few weeks of the church year, we also focus on the second coming of Jesus, the end, the day of judgment. The question we will be answering during these weeks is how to be ready for the end. 2020 has been a rough year. We have faced pandemics, economic uncertainty, and bitter political battles. Many are saying that we need to prepare for civil unrest, for chaos. Jesus tells us that we need to be prepared for the end, either the end of our personal life or the end, which is his return. Jesus taught a lot about this second coming, about the end. During one of these times, he spoke these words, Matthew chapter 23, verses 11 and 12. "The person who is greatest among you will be your servant. Whoever honors himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be honored." The first thing we need to be ready for the end is to have an attitude check. We need to have a humble attitude. So what does that mean? A truly humble person is not someone who thinks of himself less, but rather thinks of others instead of thinking of himself. A truly humble person understands that he has no standing in the eyes of God. Yet he trusts God to hear his prayer and to answer. Psalm 34, verse 18, we read these words, "The Lord is near to those whose hearts are humble. He saves those whose spirits are crushed." Is this not true? Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood tall and boasted in front of God. He told God all of the good things that he had done for him. The tax collector barely made it into the temple. He couldn't even look up to heaven. Instead, he beat his chest and he said, "Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner." We're told that the tax collector went home forgiven and not the Pharisee. Why? Because the Pharisee tried to show God how good he was on his own. The tax collector knew he had nothing to offer God. He knew that he was a sinner in need of forgiveness. He begged for mercy. Being humble also involves our actions. Matthew chapter 23, verse 11, we read these words: "The person who is greatest among you will be your servant." How different this is from how the world sees greatness. The world sees greatness by how many people serve you. The world sees greatness by how much you brag and boast about your accomplishments. Jesus says it's the exact opposite. True greatness comes from serving others. That's why our mission statement here at New Life says, serving the least, the last, and the lost with Christ's love to grow Christ's kingdom. It's only when we humble ourselves and serve others that Christ is glorified. When we admit that our best works are not good enough and that anything good is a result of what Christ does through us. Now, this is hard for us to do. We want to be recognized for the good that we do by others. We like having men talk good about us, bragging about us, praising us. Well, we like bragging. We like being highly thought of. Why would Jesus tell us to be humble? Because Jesus was humble. Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 30, we read these words: "Come to me, all who are tired from carrying heavy loads, and I will give you rest. Place my yoke over your shoulders and learn from me, because I am gentle and humble. Then you will find rest for yourselves, because my yoke is easy and my burden is light." How did Jesus show that he was humble? Well, Philippians chapter 2, verse 8, we read these words: "He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, death on a cross." Jesus, God in the flesh, humbled himself to be arrested by his creation. He who deserves all honor and praise was shamefully treated and mocked. He who is the source of life gave his life on the cross. He did not use his authority to stop the false trial. He did not use his power to strike down his accusers and tormentors. Instead, he humbled himself. He allowed himself to be mistreated, abused, and killed. He did that out of love for you and for me. His humbling of himself means our exaltation. He became despised in the eyes of men so that you and I could be prized in the eyes of God. His coming back to life, never to die again, is proof that God will honor you as his child. Well, how does humbling yourself prepare yourself for the end? Will you stop trusting in your own power to save yourself? I mean, let's be honest. Can you or I really change the election? Can you or I really stand up to civil unrest and chaos? That happens in the movies, but not in real life. Reality is, you and I do not have the power, the money, the influence to make changes. In fact, if you or I were in charge, things would probably not be much different. Because we're flawed. We're sinful people. But if we humble ourselves, admit to God that we're helpless and in need of his help, he will answer. We may not be able to change our country, but we can serve someone in need today. We can show people Yesu by how we love others. We can show people Jesus by how we serve. We can show people that it is not us, but Jesus working through us. When we are humble in this way, Jesus is glorified. He does great things through humble people. He will honor us by calling us his child. We'll not need to fear the end. Why? Because we have an inheritance that cannot be removed. It's not based on what we do, but based on humbly acknowledging these words. Sing with me. Jesus paid it all to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain, he washed it white as snow. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you